Hey guys, in this video we're going to be checking out the Eken 4K action camera. This is the V8S, and it's pretty similar to a lot of 4K action cameras on the market right now. But before we take a closer look at the camera, let me just go over all the accessories that come with it, and let's get this out of the way. It comes with a ton of stuff. Let's see here. We got a waterproof case and a mount, and we got a second mount here. We've got looks like a bicycle handle mount. We have a second back for the hard case, for the waterproof case, but this is not, I don't believe this is waterproof. There's a slot here. You got a mount here for a tripod. It's like a frame. You have a charger, USB, I think it's 5 volts, 1.5 amps, and you get a nice USB cable, micro USB. Get some additional mounts here for the, for these mounts. This slides in, and you get some additional mounts. Lots of stuff here, zip ties and other cables. Get a remote, and I'll cover this here a little bit later. It lets you remotely take pictures and start and stop your video. And it comes with a little Velcro strap to put this on your wrist or wrap it around something like a pole or selfie stick, something like that. And let's see what else. Okay, tripod's included as well. It's a pretty basic tripod. You can use this as a handheld device as well with a little tripod screw here, but then you're going to need to use the frame here because I don't believe, there's no tripod screw on the bottom of the camera. And you also get a pretty nice manual. I'll talk about this in a little bit. All right, let me get all this out of the way. Okay, so this is a little bit different than a lot of the action cameras that you're going to find on the market. They've simplified the user interface and the number of options and stuff that you have available to you. So I guess for some people it's going to be less confusing and easier to use. But for like people that are more power users and want like more options and stuff, you probably are not going to like it as much. But we'll go over into the menu here in a second. But that's, I think, the differentiating feature or factor of this particular model. And I already know that there's a newer model, I think it's called the V9S, that's going to be out pretty soon. This model's been out for a little while. I'll probably be getting the V9S later. I think the main difference is this one only does 4K at 25 frames per second, and a lot of the other action cameras will do 4K at 30 frames per second. But this one has electronic image stabilization at 4K 25 frames per second, whereas say like the Box or the Hawkeye, Firefly, I think it was the 9S, those are only doing 4K at 30 frames per second, but with no electronic image stabilization. So yeah, there's a lot of differences there. I think the neat thing about the next model that's coming out, the 9S, is it's going to have 4K 30 frames per second with electronic image stabilization. I think that's the thing about the models that they're coming out with from Eken, is all of their modes or all their video resolutions all support electronic image stabilization. So if you're into that feature and you like it, this camera has it on all the modes, so it's available everywhere. However, this is kind of a downside. It's on all the time. You can't turn it off. So if you happen to not like the EIS feature, yeah, you're not going to be able to turn it off, so maybe this camera is not going to be for you. Anyway, so let's get right into the camera itself. Standard GoPro form factor here. Power button in the front here. You get an additional LCD screen here on the front along with your lens. On the side here you got a micro USB for charging, micro HDMI for video out, and your micro SD card slot. 2-inch LCD screen in the back. It's not touchscreen. You get a Wi-Fi button here to turn on and off your Wi-Fi. I think that's a microphone over here for the internal mic. And this is your shutter button for taking your photos. Another microphone input there. Okay, then on the bottom we have the battery, and they're using a kind of a non-standard, well, it's non-standard in the fact that the shape is non-standard because there's like these beveled corners here. The battery itself is pretty much the same size as all the SJ Cam kind of same as the action. All the action cameras are out there now, but they've beveled the sides or these corners here on this particular battery, and also for the battery slot. So I tried sticking in like an SJ Cam battery, and it's the same width, but because of the beveled corners here, you can't actually get that battery in there. They're limiting you to the batteries that they're selling for the Eken. So that's kind of a downside, something you should be aware of. For the battery itself, I believe it's just a 1050 milliamp hour. Yeah, it's just a 1S 1050 milliamp hour lithium ion battery, so nothing unusual there. Okay, we'll go ahead and I'll turn the camera on. Okay, so basic stuff here. You got your battery indicator, shows what mode you're in, 4K 25, and also this shows you if you're recording, those numbers will be going up and down. And this tells you that the remote is currently active. So what that indicator is telling you is that the receiver inside the camera is listening for the remote, so that you can, say for example, start and stop your video. I think that would be the gray button here. And you can see that the light has turned red, so now we're recording and the timer is going up. We can stop that. And I think it'll take a photo even if you're in video mode when you press this button here. So yeah. So normally you'd have to switch to photo mode to then take a photo. You can see here that just using the remote, I can go immediately into photo mode, and then if I go back to video mode, it switches back to video mode for me with the remote. So the remote's very handy. You know, if you normally doing this with just the buttons on the camera, on most action cameras, you would press the power button or the mode button. That would go into the next mode, the photo mode. Then you can take a photo with the shutter button like that. And then to get back to the video mode, you have to go and keep going through all these different modes to get back. And I went too fast. And then you can get back to the video mode like that, and then start and stop your video. But with the remote, that's a very nice feature. You can just go switch back and forth between photos and video. So this is a very, very handy feature, and it is included. Regarding the modes again, I kind of went there quickly. You're going to be pressing this button here. Short press will go through your modes, and it's probably, the screen here is probably flashing because of the frame rate of the camera, but it's not actually flashing when you look at it live. It just shows you basically your battery status, if the remote's on, and what current mode you're in. So if I press the mode button, we'll go into video mode, and this goes, obviously this is 14 megapixel, it goes into photo mode, and it can shoot 14 megapixel photos with this camera in that mode. You can see that we're in that mode as well. On this side, so if, say for example, if you have the camera pointed at you and you can't see what's on this screen, this screen here will tell you a little bit what's going on without having to look at the back of the screen, so it's kind of nice. And let's see, the next mode here I think is going to be, I think this is burst photo mode, so it'll shoot like a set number of photos in a row, and that can be set in the settings. And then the next mode here is your, I think it's the time-lapse mode, so it takes time-lapse video using photos. And then here, if you press the mode again, if you press the shutter to go into the video playback, it'll go into your gallery and play back videos. And then this one here will play back, or it'll show you your photos. And then press the mode one more time, and then you can go into your settings by pressing the shutter here. And then this is what I was talking about earlier. This is sort of like simplified, almost in my opinion, maybe a little bit even too much. If you go in here, let me just go back there. I have to go back to video resolutions. I passed that. This is the thing about going through the settings. If you pass it, you have to go all the way to the beginning and then go back. Alright, so I want to go in here. So it only shows you a limited number of resolutions. So you have 4K 25, 2.7K 30, and then you have 1080 60, 1080 30, and that's it. You get these 4 resolutions. You don't get 720p, no 120 frames per second, nothing like that, no super view, nothing like that. So you just get these 4. So, you know, if you're looking for less options because it's too cluttered or whatever, this is all you're going to get. And of course, I'm only going to be shooting everything in 4K, so going to be leaving it on there. And then for photo resolutions, you're going to be surprised. Only one option, 14 megapixels, and that's all you get. So again, if you're not, into shooting different, resolutions for photos, you just want the max. It's there's nothing to mess with here. You know what you're getting. That's all you're going to get. Okay, so then we'll just go quickly through some of these other settings here. You get video interval, 1 minute, 5 minutes. This guy here. Looping videos, if you want to turn that on and off, it's only, if you want the files to cut off at a certain time in case the battery dies and you don't want to lose like 30 minutes of video, for example. I usually leave that off. Timestamp, that's this timestamp that shows up in the video on the recording, and I usually turn that off because I don't like that on there. Exposure value, you can change your exposure value here manually if you feel like things are overexposed or underexposed. This is self-explanatory. I'm going to get out of here. See, I went too far and I got to go back. And this is kind of hard to use. These interfaces are a little bit difficult to use. Okay, yeah, burst mode, this is where you can say how many photos you want to take. So you get 3 photos in 1 second, or 7 photos in 2 seconds, or up to 24 in 8 seconds. And you get 4 options there, and that's it. And then you get time-lapse photo interval. This is the intervals between photos on your time-lapse. And up to 30 seconds, 60 seconds, you get 5 options there. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these. Time-lapse photo, time-lapse video resolution, time-lapse video interval. These are all different time-lapse options. Power frequency, I think that's going to change based on your country. I think it's 50 or 60. I'm going to leave it on auto. Language, I'm going to leave it on English. This is where you can turn on and off the receiver on the remote control. So currently it's turned on. I think if you turn it off, you save a little bit of battery power, but I haven't really noticed much of a difference. I think it's just safe to leave it on. Datetime, this is where you can set the datetime for the basically the metadata that's saved to the video and photos, so that you want to set that so that when you upload your photos to like some sort of online service or Instagram, whatever, that the datetime is going to be correct. Otherwise, it's going to mess up your timeline. Sound indicators to beeping sounds. Screensaver, I think that's when the screen turns off if there's no activity after a certain amount of time. We'll leave that at 1 minute. I think power saver is also, leave that at 3 minutes. That's if no activity for 3 minutes, it'll actually shut off. That's good. Okay, so then we'll talk about this format here. I'm going to hit no to that. I'll talk about the micro SD card here in a second. There's some weird stuff that goes on with the micro SD cards. Okay, so this camera is kind of sensitive to the micro SD card that you use and needs a certain speed. And in the manual, it discusses that a little bit, and it gives you a list of some cards that are compatible. And it's because when it's recording in 4K, it needs a fast card in order to record, and it's recommending at least a U3 card, which is 90 megabits per second. And here are some of the ones that they list in the manual. Now, when you put the card in the camera for the first time, it goes through a test, and if it doesn't pass that test, then it says that you can't record 4K video to it. If it does, then you'll get a message that says, great, it's fast enough, and then it saves a little file to the card so that it doesn't actually run that test again the next time you turn the camera on. If you put a new card in, it keeps running that test because it checks that little file to see if the card's fast enough. So it does that pretty much every time, unless you've done that test before with a card that's already in there, then it won't do that test again. Okay, so I've talked long enough about all the features of this camera, and so we're going to go right into the meat of all of the video samples that I've taken. All of this stuff is in 4K, 25 frames per second, so you'll want to go down in the corner here, make sure that you are playing this back on a large screen TV, for example, at 4K, so you can really get a sense of the image quality of this camera. And then I will talk about the image quality of each of the different scenes I took and settings. I took basically different times of day, bright sunlight, midday, late in the day, also at night. And you should be able to get a good sense of all the different capabilities of this camera in different lighting situations. Okay, I'm going to start off with some scenes from the car. In this particular situation, I'm actually holding the camera out the window, and you can see the electronic image stabilization works really well if you don't have steady hands, which I don't. And you can see that there's not a whole lot of shaking. Colors were pretty good. The detail is, well, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Here's another situation where I'm actually holding the camera again out the window, and even though I am, going over a lot of bumps and stuff, the video that you can see of the houses going by on the side street looks really smooth. Here's another scene from inside the car. The camera here is mounted on the window with a suction cup mount, and even going over bumps and stuff, you can hardly tell that there's any movement in the video. It looks really steady. I think the electronic image stabilization is working well. This scene is kind of interesting. I'm going from a light situation to a dark situation under the bridge here, and you can see how the when it comes out of the dark situation, the sky is very overexposed, and it does take a little bit of time for it to come back to normal. So the exposure compensation is a little slow. And then here I'm just just want to show another scene where I'm just driving kind of fast. You can see like the trees and like the light posts going by really quick. There's not a lot of motion blur, and so electronic image stabilization in this situation seems to be working pretty well. Okay, here's another daytime scene. I'm holding the camera by hand. The EIS is working very well, and I do like the way the colors are reproduced here. Not too vivid, not too saturated, not too washed out. It's overall pretty balanced. Okay, here's the same area, just a different angle, and now I'm actually moving or panning the camera by hand, and it looks pretty smooth to me. And again, I do like the way the colors are reproduced here. Okay, so here's another scene at the beach, and the sand here looks a little bit dark to me. It doesn't look natural. It almost looks like it's kind of burned. But the sky looks fine. The water looks fine. The water with the white crest looks fine to me. Something I noticed on a lot of these video samples is that the sharpness seems a little soft. And I don't know. Some people might not like that. Some people might like that. Some people say that the softness makes it look a little more cinematic. I'm pretty sure that they've done this in the firmware because I don't know a lot of other action cameras that do it this way. It does look a little soft in terms of the focus and a little bit loss of detail, but it's not terrible. Okay, so here's just a bunch of scenes from towards the end of the day or near sunset, and just wanted to show off like how the wide dynamic range works on this camera. I think it's fairly decent. You don't get a lot of overexposed or underexposed areas in the image. Obviously, certain things where the light's very low in the sky and the object is in front of the sun, it's going to go dark. There's not much you can do about that. That's pretty much typical of any action camera or any CMOS camera, but I think this camera handles it pretty well. Okay, so here's a couple of scenes from night, and I think this is where this camera and a lot of other action cameras suffer the most. At night, basically you lose pretty much all detail. The image turns very grainy. Like the electronic image stabilization kind of doesn't work so great, especially if the camera's moving around a lot, like you'll see a little bit later in this next scene. And it gets sort of like this sort of jello effect, and it's more pronounced when you have a low light situation. So, yeah, it's kind of how it goes, par for the course for a lot of these action cameras. But just wanted to show you guys what it looks like, just in case you're curious. Okay, guys, that's going to do it for this review. I hope all the video samples were helpful. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the section below. I'll put links in the description to where you can pick up this product if you're interested, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.